Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. I am going to put out a safe sex reminder. Now, about 3 or 4 podcasts ago from me, I put out, I was talking about trichomonas and HPV, human papillomavirus. In the instance of that particular podcast, I was talking a lot about how for men, there aren't a lot of symptoms. I mean, I went and did some research on this, and I was really surprised at the fact that on the occasion, especially for trichomonas, there are times that there are symptoms, and a doctor will see that, or you'll feel something going into a doctor, they'll see it, and they'll says, okay, well, they have an idea of what it is, and they can culture it, and they can tell you exactly what it is. But the idea that something like that could lie dormant in the body for a long period of time and you not know it, and then it resurfaces. And the big interest that I had in this in particular was because it is so prevalent. I mean, I've discussed HPV a little bit, and we'll do a recap on that. HPV is very, very, very prevalent. And in the instance of having an outbreak, you can tell there are physical symptoms. HPV, human papillomavirus, you may have little ulcerations that show up. You can have the things that look like cauliflower that show up on the skin. And again, these are very visible. But once the body has mobilized to attack the virus, then it sort of overpowers it. But the virus will, now that you've been infected, it is a part of your system. But what the body does is the body suppresses it, and it lives in the nerves. I mean, if you want proof of that, notice that whenever you have an outbreak of HPV, that quite often it is painful. And that's one of the indications that something might be coming on. So if you're taking a retroviral type drug, like a cyclovir, then that will help your body mobilize to fight it to make its duration last a lot less. So there are medications out there that you can take. But again, it is something that you may contract and not even have it. So if you go down the road and you have a new partner and they become, let's say, maybe they've never, or maybe you've never suspected that you've had HPV, and there may be a possibility of transmission from your last sex partner because what you are seeing are symptoms of something and you'll get checked out. Well, obviously, you're going to check the recency of your last sexual activity. Now, again, that's no guarantee that you haven't already had it. But being in conversation with your doctor, you can narrow some things down. But now what's going to happen is that you're going to need to let your partner know, your sex partner know that, hey, that you have something and that you both need to get treated. So the purpose of this podcast is to revisit some past practices or best practices. And one of those would be to get yourself tested when you have a new sex partner. Tested before you become physically intimate. Therefore, you can provide a relatively clean bill of health. And I say relatively because in the case of men who don't necessarily have symptoms of either one of these, HPV or trichomonas. And while trichomonas in and of itself isn't as scary as HPV, because when you have HPV, because of the herpes and the outbreaks that you have and the kind of medications you have to take for it, it is something that once you contract it, well, you've got it for life. Trichomonas, on the other hand, is something that is basically, it's a parasite. And once you get the medication for that particular what ails you, and the specifics are the medications you have, metronidazole or tinidazole, and that is generally what they prescribe for trichomonas. Now, again, here's the real sensitive part. It's the fact that you can have a blood test for a lot of the other things in terms of sexually transmittable diseases and or infections, and they will show up. But some of them do not. Now, what surprises us about a lot of these things, it's not one of the types of infections that really gets talked about a lot, that is being trichomonas, as common as it is. Now, you can do quite a bit of research on it because there's lots of videos, there is literature out there, but I remember sex education, they talked about contraceptives, they talked about chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, and the complications that happen with those sexually transmitted diseases / infections. And they definitely wanted you to not ignore those things. Now, in the case of some of those, you have a reaction when you are infected. It could be painful urination. It could be soreness or tenderness. There could be outbreaks in terms of blistering of the skin. Lots of those kinds of things definitely get your attention. And from time to time, as in the case with herpes, you have an outbreak. The body will mobilize to attack the virus and put it back into submission. And as I shared in the other podcast, from the research I had, the body in maybe a space of 2 to 3 years can totally manage that particular type of infection. So you still have it, but the body can maintain it. And in the case of trichomonas, the body may be able to manage and eliminate it, but it could definitely stay dormant in your system. And that's where you wonder, okay, what can you do about it? If you don't know about it, probably nothing. And it certainly brings to mind for one to think about your going forward now about how much more careful you want to be when it comes to having intimate partners. As far as the past, you may have to revisit some occasions, some encounters that you've had, and think about how risky those encounters may have been, and that would be a good reason to want to curb your behavior. If you happen to have a blood test and you get a clean bill of health, well, that might be good for now. But in time, that clean bill of health may not sustain itself because of what I've shared about how these things can mask themselves and not be detected for a while. So therein is a reason to want to be vigilant and responsible to yourself as well as your present or maybe future partner. And perhaps in the wisdom of the ages, we talk about what safe sex is, and that is a barrier protection. That is when you're being intimate to have one partner, because if not, then you run the risk of exposing yourself and your partners, I say that in plural, to other things, meaning viruses and infections that you're not yet aware of. And I would say think about it in this way. When you think back to, let's say, maybe the encounter which gave you the infection or disease, it probably just took the joy out of that experience. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back after this.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm John Johnson hosting the show. And you know what? I think Valentine's Day is right around the corner. And we want to talk about something that, at least for a bit here, that might make your Valentine's a little more interesting. Now, I don't always buy into the hype that you've got to buy a lot of stuff just for Valentine's Day. I know some people are really into that. And some people are real pragmatic. I say, don't break the bank, but do a little something to acknowledge your partner. And I believe you should do that all the time, not just on Valentine's Day. For those of you that have to create a get out of the doghouse gift, then it's certainly an opportunity for you to shine. So go spend a little money, buy some candy, get some flowers for your partner. And you know what? It can go both ways. It's real typical to expect that guys should give their wife or girlfriend or significant other some flowers, and it's a very nice gesture. I think you can do this all year long, but this is the particular time of the year when it's going to be relatively expensive to take on that endeavor. But invest in it. Remember, it's part of your future. So think about this. If you get the Valentine's, let's say you get the card and you've got the flowers, you know, what else might make this a little special? You know, there's lots of hot little outfits out there that you can buy. You can buy them online, and maybe you can go into one of the lingerie stores and pick up something that's really special. Guys, if you know your partner's size, then I think she'd be real surprised to find something a little special like that and ask her to wear it for you. But you got to do it real nice. You know, here's something else that happens. If you find out what your significant other's favorite team is, grab that jersey and put it on for him and surprise your significant other. Now, ladies, I'm talking to you. You know, you've got a guy, he's got a special team, whether it's football or hockey or baseball or basketball. Grab that jersey and wear it. Nothing else. Remember, this is Valentine's Day. We're going to make this really special. That's an idea. You guys are really turned on by something like that. Yeah, they get excited about the lingerie, the sexy bra, the panties, the underwear, the garter belts and things like that, you know, because it reminds them of things that they've seen. But, you know, it is kind of sexy to see a girl wearing the jersey and nothing else. I mean, you're at home. You know, this is a special, intimate time. And, you know, put on something sweet smelling. They can appreciate that too, and it'll remind them of this time and time again. Every time they smell that scent, because it's something that you did for them. And this is why it's special, because you're doing it for your partner. Now, this is not some great big sacrifice that you have to do. This is something really easy that you can manufacture this in a fairly short amount of time. You don't have to go to any great lengths. I mean, you might have the jersey there already. And if you don't, if you've planned this ahead enough, then you might be able to order it and get it in time for that special occasion. But even still, if it's not something that you can do for Valentine's, then you can do it any other time. Just make it happen. Now, something else that you might consider, and this kind of thing usually requires a little bit of planning. And I'm talking to you ladies. Guys really love those boudoir photographs. You can hire a photographer. They've got studios where you can put on some nice lingerie, and you can either do some really sexy poses, and, you know, stuff that's still tastefully done and something that you would be able to share. I mean, some people frame them up and you can either put it on the nightstand or maybe get a really large blow up picture of it and put it somewhere on the wall in a frame, but these things can be done in a very tasteful fashion. And there are photographers that specialize in that kind of thing. And they really, really look nice. They do the makeup for you. They can do your hair. And if you don't have garments that you think are sexy, then they might be able to provide something for you. But like I said, you can search for boudoir photographers, and I'm sure they have a website that you can look at some of the other photographs that they've taken from models that they've gotten releases from, just to give you an idea of what type of photographs or how you might look. And that's a great gift, because there's nothing more special to a guy than knowing when he's looking at something like that. It's like, wow, you look like a model, and wow, and it's a surprise. He will treasure that, I promise you, because it is quite a task, and I know it's a lot of work to plan something like that and make it happen. And he will definitely be appreciated for a long time with a project like that. I have never once heard a guy object to getting a photograph of his significant other wearing, a boudoir type portrait. They're great. They last for years. And you know what? Also, I know it's kind of going out on the fringes for some of you, but when you look back on those photos and realize how beautiful you are inside and out, it's a nice memory to have, to be able to share that, to have had that intimacy between you and your partner. And age knows no bounds. You don't have to be young to do something like this. If you're in your 50s, 60s, or 70s, you can always look pretty. And here's something, and I want to put this to rest. A lot of women feel like they have to have the perfect body. Guys don't require that. I realize women, sometimes you're really hard on yourselves about that. And we all can be hypercritical from time to time. And I think we do it with the best intentions. But what happens is we wind up discouraging ourselves from doing things that we might want to do, and that's going to have a really good outcome. I mean, if you could imagine, when you go to the effort of doing something like that, your guy's really going to appreciate it. It's probably something that he might not be comfortable asking you to do, because it might feel a little awkward. But it's nice when you bring the project or the gift to him. You can wrap it, or you can present it in any way, shape, or form you want, but it will always be appreciated. So don't be so hard on yourself, because guys will tell you that they really do appreciate what you do, and that you're always going to be sexy to them. But it's nice when you can take it to the next level. And something else that guys really like, in fact, I find lovers, both men and women, love being teased in those little subtle ways. Most couples have their own sort of shorthand when they're communicating with each other. And the longer you know each other, the more abbreviated the conversations become. Sometimes you even get to the point where you're finishing each other's sentences. Well, that's great. So here it is when you want to be playful, kind of banter back and forth, and you can do it either on the phone, which I think is great, because you can hear that voice, that sexiness that comes through, or you can send a text. Now understand that when you start sending electronic mail, whether it's an email or a text message or something like that, that it's out there for the world to see forever and ever. So in general, just know if you do it by voice, it's there. Meaning talk to the person. I don't even mean put it on voicemail, but you can talk to the person. So decide for yourself how you want to handle that. And I always tell people to be very, very cautious when you're transmitting anything electronically, because if it's a text message or an email, it's out there forever and ever. So have fun, but be smart about it. Now, here's something that came up, and it's just a reference to the vehicle, but you might get frisky in the SUV. And if you're really from a different generation, remember what we call an SUV now. Back in the day, they used to call them station wagons. So if you're calling your big vehicle, a station wagon, I just know that you're from a different day and time. And I crack up every time I see one of those old cars. But I got to take a break here, and I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. And, here's something. Hey, ladies, if you are looking at your fella and his male member is sort of shrouded in a bunch of, let's say, a hairy mass, then you need to communicate to him that he needs to shave that down. Now, guys are real quick to talk about how they like their women to trim their female area, and guys have to do the same courtesy. It's a hygiene thing, I think. And cleaning it up and making it look pretty. It's, like I said, it's about hygiene. So there are tools, and it's called manscaping. Well, that's the idea. But the manscaping, there are tools that men can use to shave the area around their scrotum and other parts that are connected. You can go online, you look for something like that, and that would be an excellent gift. Whether it's Valentine's or any other time, anytime you can think about it, and you want to see an improvement in the guy's parts, that's one of the ways in which, now, guys would really go for this if you tell them this part. When it is shaved, when it's trimmed up and it's clean, it actually looks larger. You tell a guy that, and believe me, he will buy into it, because we know that guys are really sensitive about that particular conversation. Whether there's any validity or not to the fact that it matters to you, his size. The thing is, if you're going to borrow that as for a topic, then this is an excellent time to get him to clean it up. Now, some guys aren't even aware that that's something that they should be doing. And just for the sake of maybe he doesn't have a guy in his experience that discusses that sort of thing, because it's, some guys are real sensitive and they don't want to talk about things like that. But this is something that you can mention as his partner for the simple fact that, hey, it'll make you look larger. And for that, it'll probably be a very short conversation. Now there could be a couple of ways he can go about this. He might want to be off on his own and experiment with the tools and come back and say, ta-da, here it is. Or you might make it a joint effort and add some creativity to whatever playtime you may have. But I think it'll work out for you. It's an excellent opportunity to not only practice some hygiene, but it could be a bonding moment. Now, some people may choose to use scissors or mustache clippers or whatever it is that you feel you have at your disposal. But in any event, be careful with those things, because if you sort of get a nick or a cut, then you're going to be remembered for being a butcher. But it's nice that you can share that opportunity together. And if you're a woman and if you've never seen a guy sort of clean himself up like that, hey, it might be one of those moments that you can share together. Whatever you two decide. But understand that in the big picture, this is about hygiene and keeping things clean and keeping them neat. So, some people, like I say, don't have a lot of experience with it, so there's going to be some experimenting with that until they get it right. But that's why I say if you buy the tools for it, then it's likely to have a much better outcome. And I'm sure the things come with instructions, and there's probably a video somewhere in the world about how to do that kind of thing. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's pretty basic. But if you need some instructions on it, I'm sure they're out there somewhere. So as a point of a thought here, with personal hygiene tools like that, you don't go sharing them, because it's like, imagine they're like needles. If you ever do a nick or a cut and you've got some bodily fluids or something on it like that, you don't want to go sharing that, because there could be something that it needs to be sterilized. So your razor is your razor, his razor is his razor. You don't mix it. Okay? That is just a little something to live by. I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't even share my toothbrush. Okay. And just because we're talking about shaving, I just feel the need to mention this. It may sound comical, but I'm just going to say it because I can imagine somebody is going to try this out and it's going to come out not very good. Like, just because you're shaving the area down there does not mean you put cologne on it. No. It may sound like a good idea, but no, you don't put cologne on your guy parts. It's just, you don't do that. Soap and water, that's it. Cologne, no. No. And ladies, don't even give them the idea. Now, after you've done the touch-up, it'd be a good opportunity to take a shower if you haven't already. There you can share some fun time in the water and get a little frisky and make it memorable. So while I'm kind of on this thing about talking about the guy parts, ladies, here's something I want you to remind your significant other guy to do, is to get regular prostate screenings. I know it's not a very exciting subject for a guy to think about, because we're talking about a digital rectal exam. That is when a doctor, and it could be man or woman doctor, they take their finger, they stick it in the man's anus, and they're feeling for the prostate, and they're checking its condition. Men get screenings for, that is with blood work. They can check their prostate-specific antigen, and it's to see if it's high, then they definitely want to keep an eye on this, because these are the kinds of things that could be precursors to maybe possibly cancer, or if there's something going on with the man's prostate. This is serious, because for men in and of themselves, they may feel symptoms of some type, but they don't check it out, because guys are notorious for not really taking care of themselves, and that's just something guys do. Well, they should be a little more concerned about that, because when you think about all the responsibilities that you have, the people who are depending upon you, it really is important that you do regular screenings, just like you would expect a woman who would get pap smears, get mammograms, and there are lots of things that women are conditioned to believe that they should do to take care of themselves. Guys have to be educated to do the same thing. And with men, there is obviously the idea there's a lot of modesty involved in this, and they just don't want to deal with that. They don't want to face that. And for whatever it is, you got to coach them through this. You got to talk to them and explain to them how important this is. So, ladies, you have to do a little bit of research on this and then present it to the guys. Guys, those men who are listening to this, it is fairly routine, and doctors can do this. You can get it taken care of, and even more so, if you have a concern about this area of your body, if you're having difficulty with urinating, if you're having difficulty with an erection or something, then talk to somebody about it and get something done. Because perish the thought, if it is something that is seriously medically going on, then ignoring it doesn't make it better. One thing that I have heard many times is, at least if you're going to go in and get regular health checkups, you may stumble on to something else that was basically unbeknownst to you. And I've talked to a number of people that have had medical conditions that were discovered because of something else. So if you are having a concern about something of your health, please get it checked out. And with that, I'm going to sign off on this broadcast. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.